So it's a pleasure meeting you. Thank you for your time.
The same.
Modo de Vida magazine is interested in providing our readers an extensive article about the topic of sea level rising.
Very good.
So for us, it's important to ask you if you could give a quick summary of what can we expect in the next 20, 50, 100 years being an island particularly.
Sure. Okay, so 20, 50, and 100 years. It's a good time frame. No, those are good.
Thank you.
So in the next 20 years, sea level will rise a few inches, almost certainly. 50 years from now, there's more variation possible depending on what we do to slow the warming, to slow the greenhouse gases which comes from burning fossil fuels will have more impact in 50 years. And so looking 50 years ahead, if we really do the right thing, maybe we can keep sea level rise to a foot or two. If we don't, if we keep burning fossil fuels and trapping more heat in the atmosphere, which is what's warming the planet and melting the ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica, if we let that continue and it accelerates as it is now, then we could have maybe 5 feet in 50 years.
Okay.
And looking ahead 100 years, the year 2122, of course it's hard to imagine. But by then, if we don't do the right thing now, we could have more than 10 feet of sea level rise.
Wow, 10 feet.
More than 10 feet.
Okay.
If we do the right thing, maybe we can keep it to 3, 4, 5 feet.
Okay.
And that's going to be a challenge, but over 100 years, we can adapt to that. So
Yes.
we have to do 3 things at once. We have to slow the warming. We have to prepare for the floods that can happen soon, like another Maria.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to start designing now for sea level being higher, which has not happened for 120,000 years on this
Okay.
planet.
Okay.
So we have to plan at 3 different levels.
So those design considerations of sea level rising, could you maybe give us an example of some considerations?
Sure. Well, again, the different kinds of flooding. So there's a flood during a rainfall event, and if you're on low ground and there's cliffs above you and the rain's going to have runoff, and so you might have 4 inches of rain, but it turns into 12 inches of flooding downhill. That's
in our
runoff.
mountains.
So we have rain and runoff is one thing. Of course, we plan for a terrible hurricane. We've all seen what that is, like a Maria, and we're
Yes.
coming up on the anniversary, 5 years. But sea level is different. It's the drip filling the bucket. It's like a big barrel of water, or your roof is leaking, and you put a bucket underneath it, and it doesn't seem like much, but overnight the bucket's full and then starts overflowing.
Okay.
And that's more like sea level rise. So we have to think of flooding as 3 different things. The kind of flooding that can happen from a storm, that can happen from rainfall and runoff, and the rains are getting heavier now, and then planning differently for sea level, because now we know enough to realize that sea level is no longer the static or fixed line. Sea level can change tens of feet over centuries.
Okay.
That's new information.
Okay.
So we have to design for all 3. The energy part, the kind of weather events of rainfall and runoff and storms, and then planning for future sea level now while we bring that into designs by elevating buildings, maybe putting them on floats, maybe moving further inland or uphill,
Yep.
but recognizing that that land may not be there for your grandchildren.
Yes. That for me particularly or personally is very important because I actually live right at the ocean.
Yes.
So it's a concern that we've always had for our building. So I
Yes.
thank you for being here and for
Thank
sharing
you.
this information. I know there are certain tipping points that are important for people to know, or readers to understand. What can you say are those tipping points right now that are the most that affect the sea level rise? I know
Greenland is melting very quickly. It's still not noticeable at a place like Puerto Rico, but we know from the measurements on Greenland and Antarctica that the melting is happening faster and faster and faster and faster, and that's a tipping point.
Okay.
Even if we go to 100% renewable energy, solar panels and wind farms and geothermal energy, which is great, and get off fossil fuels, the melting of the ice is not going to stop for decades.
Okay.
So that's a tipping point. The ice is melting faster. The sea level is rising faster. It's only about 1/4 of an inch a year right now. So we tend to ignore it. But now is the time to plan for the future.
To plan for it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you can count on our magazine to continue providing this information. Very important to create this awareness for us to act now, as you said. So again, we thank you for your time.
No, I thank you for your interest in your magazine, and I really encourage you to work with this program at the Puerto Rico Science Trust. This program is the Caribbean Center for Rising Seas. It's new, less than a year old, but we see it as a long-term program, and we would like Puerto Rico to be a leader in designing for future sea level rise now.
Perfect. Thank you then.
You're welcome. Thank you.